All right, hello. My name is Annika Schneider, and I am going to be helping to host this book arts series tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce Lauren Emeritz. Lauren is a letterpress printer and book artist. Her work combines traditional hand carving and letterpress printing with modern techniques. She creates prints and books by hand using a Vandercook press and wood type, including type she designs and carves herself. She publishes her artist books under the name Abstract Orange. In 2016, the Library of Congress, Rare Books and Special Collections Divisions acquired her book, Hand Carved Alphabet. In 2017, Lauren completed an internship in letterpress design at Hatch Showprint in Nashville, Tennessee, founded in 1879. Lauren holds a BFA in graphic design from the University of Delaware. She creates art and design in Washington, D.C., and teaches letterpress printing at Pyramid Atlantic Art Center in Hyattsville, Maryland. In 2023, her work was acquired by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She is currently the artist in residence at Montgomery College. Okay, I will now hand it over to Lauren, and then we will also have time for a Q&A period at the end.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. See if we can get this one to work. All right, can you all see my screen now? Nice.
Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. All right. I just want to say thank you to CBAA for hosting me today. I'm a big fan of your community of book artists. My name is Lauren Emeritz. I'm a letterpress printer and book artist. Some of you may have heard of me, but some of you might not have. So I'm just gonna go ahead and give you a quick introduction. I started in graphic design, which I love. I'm a total typography nerd. I found my way off of the computer and into the letterpress shop at Pyramid Atlantic. I fell in love with wood type and paper and ink and making things by hand. When I discovered the world of book arts, I knew it was for me. I have created several books, some of which are in special collections around the country, including the Library of Congress and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. One thing you should know about me is that I'm obsessed with the color orange, not in a bad way, but in an ever-present way. I wear it, I name my company Abstract Orange after it, and I use it in all my projects. Today, I'm going to talk about two of my books, Earth and Water. The Earth book started because I wanted to do a book about global warming and the impact of humans on the planet. My initial idea had been that the Earth is fragile and we were destroying it. But as I turned the thought in my mind, I started to see that the Earth was not the fragile one. Rather, the ecosystem that we live in is fragile because we, humans, need a balance of heat and cold and light and dark. I realized that humans are the fragile ones. As my book shifted, it became a letter from Earth, wise old Earth, Earth which has been here longer than humans and does not need humans to survive. Honestly, the text is a bit terrifying. So that you're familiar with what I'm talking about, I'm going to do a reading of the book, and then I will talk about the production of the book. This is the cover. This is an end sheet. Earth, designed and printed by Abstract Orange, Lauren Emeritz. Dear humans, although my climate is changing, I am not worried. I will survive. I may become gaseous or covered in water or ice or sand or salt, but I will be fine. You will become extinct. You will battle for resources or drown or freeze or starve. I have been here for 1 billion years, and I will be here for 1 billion more. Your inability to protect your habitat, me, will make you a blip that destroys itself. This is the ISBN number and colophon page. This is the end sheet. And this is the back cover. So I had this text in my mind, which is a little bit frightening. And I wanted to figure out how to make it into a book. Around this time, I was working at Pyramid Atlantic Art Center, and an artist, Celine, did a demonstration of cyanotype printing. I was interested in learning more about the process and took a workshop with another artist, Eliza, who demonstrated how to process images in the bright sunshine. When I saw this process using UV light to create an image, I knew it would work for my book. I felt like the images were created by the earth around me rather than by me. I felt like I was giving voice to the earth. So I had the text in my head, the letter from Earth to the humans, and the process I wanted to use, cyanotype printing. Except cyanotype is not really a printing process. I needed to find a way to make this wet, variable process to create an edition. To be consistent, I created these leaf and plastic collages on plexiglass as my negative. That way the images would be fixed in place. I could have also made transparencies, but I preferred to make the images directly from the plants and plastics instead of filtering them through a computer. To have consistent lighting, I used a UV exposure unit, also at Pyramid Atlantic. Romantically, I would have liked them to be put in the sun, but by the time I was ready to produce the books, it was winter and the sun was not strong enough or consistent enough. You can see here in the picture, there are 4 different images with the different leaves. Through testing, I found it was better to letterpress the text first and then process the cyanotype. I used a combination of neon orange letterpress oil-based ink and Hanco soy-based ink, which is a slightly darker orange. The oil-based ink worked like a resist for the cyanotype chemicals, so it did not fully overprint the blue on the orange. I'd like to take a moment to thank the DC Commission of the Arts and Humanities and CBAA. I received grants from both organizations that allowed me to purchase supplies, including the BFK paper, which is super beautiful, great for letterpress, and really the best for this wet process. I coated the BFK paper with cyanotype solution. Compared to letterpress ink, cyanotype solution is a little fussy. It's made of 2 elements mixed together. I had to mix each element with water 24 hours before I wanted to use it, and then mix the 2 elements right before I wanted to expose the images. That mixture of 2 combined elements is only good for 2 hours. I failed chemistry, so I'm not sure why, but I'm sure the answer is out there. After coating the BFK, I would let it dry for about 15 minutes. Then I would expose it for 20 minutes. Then I would soak it for 30 minutes. Then I would rinse it off and let it dry. Here's some quick math. My edition was 20 books. Each book was 10 spreads or sheets of paper plus 2 end sheets. That's 240 plus a couple for proofing and messing up, and also the covers. In the end, I did the cyanotype dance about 300 times. Mix the chemicals, coat the paper with a roller, dry, expose, soak, rinse, and dry. I used a drying system like that of paper making, with paper towel blotters and cardboard stacked to stack the sheets while they were drying. I was able to process about 40 images in 6 hours. So roughly 1 million hours later, I finished printing them all. I apologize to the other artists at Pyramid as I took up a bunch of table space while working on this process. At some point during this process, the Morgan Conservatory, a paper maker in Cleveland, Ohio, decided to make an orange handmade paper. As you know, I'm obsessed with orange, so I decided I had to use it. I purchased it for the end sheets. This image shows the orange handmade paper in the water bath after being exposed. And the image starts out a little bit light and then it comes to the foreground. For the binding process, I used a drum leaf binding. For those not familiar, this is a binding where the spreads are printed as flat pages and then folded and glued back to back. I used exposed book boards for the covers and orange book cloth for the spine. I was able to cyanotype on the book boards, but not the book cloth. Unfortunately, the book cloth shrunk when I tried to cyanotype on it. So I letterpressed the spine instead. Because of the wet process of cyanotype, the book is a variable edition, meaning all the copies are not exactly the same. At this point, I just wanted to pause for a moment to thank CBAA for their support. I'm an artist outside of academia. I followed CBAA for many years before joining because it felt like an organization for people in college, either actively studying or teaching. It did not feel like a place for me, a person who went to college for graphic design 20 years ago, but has not been a part of college since then. There are several times over the years that I looked at various MFA programs, but I could never afford the time and money to pursue those options. I finally joined when my fellow pyramid artist, Sarah, told me the organization was open to people outside of the college structure. I'm very happy and thankful to be part of the book arts community. Yeah. So after I finished my Earth book, I wanted to continue with the nature theme. I enjoy making series and decided I would continue with the 4 classical elements: earth, water, fire, and air. Around this time, Celine was teaching another artist, June, how to make paper. I was invited to tag along. I had just used the handmade paper from the Morgan Conservatory in my Earth book and enjoyed the texture and beauty of the paper. As I learned more about paper making, I saw how much water was used in the process, and I saw the possible parallel between the UV light used in creating the Earth book and using water to create the water book. And my idea started to form. So that you're familiar with the book, I'm going to do a reading of this one as well. And then I'll talk about the production. This is the cover. It's an end sheet. Water, designed and printed on handmade paper by Abstract Orange, Lauren Emeritz. Water flows. Drops forming streams. Joining rivers.
Bookmaker down near Washington, D.C. And you're muted, right? I have not muted, yes.
Traveling to the ocean. Freezing into ice. Melting back into the sea. Building waves. Splashing on the shore. Burrowing into the land. Crashing against the rocks. Creating mist and spray. Evaporating into the sky. Forming clouds. Drifting. Raining down. Soaking the land. Puddles rising into floods. Washing away what was. Shaping the land. Shaping the people. This is the colophon page. And the end sheet. And the back cover. For the production of this book, I'll first be talking about paper making. In paper making, you beat fiber, in this case primarily cotton, into pulp using a large machine called a beater. It is similar to a blender, but way bigger, stronger, and louder. You mix the fiber with a bunch of water and beat it for an hour or more. Then you drain out most of the water and put the pulp in large buckets. To form sheets, you place some of the pulp in a large vat with more water. Use a frame called a mold and decal to form sheets. I used a 12 by 18 mold and decal and then toured the paper down to the final size. Once you form the sheet, you have to couch or lay down the sheet on pellons. You stack these sheets and pellons as you go, and then at the end, you put them in a hydraulic press and squeeze out the water. You let it rest in the press. After about 30 minutes, you stack the paper in a dry box using felts, blotters, and cardboard to allow air to pass through to dry the sheets, while also pressing them flat. It takes about 3 to 5 days to dry the sheets. The formation of sheets requires fiber, time, and pressure. I wanted my paper to be more of a text weight paper, so I tried to keep it fairly thin. In some places, you can see it got very thin, almost lacy. When I started making the sheets, I was not sure how it would turn out. I just started making paper, so the paper was a variety of colors and textures. I enjoyed the variation as it emphasized the handmade quality. When I decided I would use the paper to make a book, I thought about how many sheets I would need, math again, and I decided I would do a sewn binding, my first sewn binding for an edition. To make the book the right thickness, I decided to do 4 signatures of 3 sheets each. That's 12 sheets of paper per book. With 20 in the edition, that would be 240 plus 2 for each cover. It's 280 plus some for proofing and messing up. In the end, I made over 300 sheets of paper for this book. Each time I would go to the studio, I would either beat some pulp, form some sheets, or both. Once I had enough sheets of paper, I decided I wanted them to be a little more consistent. I decided to use a paint wash to tint the sheets blue. This introduced more water and variation into the process. I used an acrylic wash instead of watercolor so the color would not be affected by the printing process. You can see them here drying on the cardboard. Then I was ready to print. I had written a text, sort of like poetry, that follows the water through nature. I wanted the text to flow through the book. I also had a list of words with other more problematic aspects of water that I wanted to print in the background. For this background text, I used non-toxic mineral spirits to dilute the ink to make it watery. Instead of inking the type with rollers, I would brush it on the type with a foam brush. In some places, it would show through the paper and interact with the blue text on the other side. For the main text, I used wood type printed on a Vandercook. I had to lay out the pages as reader spreads so they would read correctly once I had folded and sewed the pages. I printed the main text, the flow of water in nature, in blue ink. After I finished printing, I bound the books using a 5-hole pamphlet stitch. I collated the pages and then punched holes with a book cradle and all. I used neon orange book thread, seen in this slide, to sew the pages together. Then I glued the signatures together like a perfect binding. I reinforced the glue spines with handmade paper backed with fabric. I covered individual book boards for the front and back covers and glued those to the end sheets and the fabric in the spine. Once the book was finished, I did something that seems a little strange in bookbinding. I dripped water down the front, back, and spine of the book to create a water droplet effect. This book is available for purchase from me at abstractorange.com, Kelmscott Bookshop, or Vamp and Tramp booksellers. At this time, there's only 1 copy of the Earth book still available for purchase, but you can see it at several institutions such as the University of Maryland, Swarthmore College, UC Berkeley, and the Met in New York. I want to thank the DC government for an artist grant that allowed me to purchase supplies and access to the studio to work on this project. Please feel free to check out more of my work on Instagram at abstractorange or on my website, abstractorange.com. Thank you again to CBAA, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about my books and share my process with you all.
Thanks, Lauren. Are there any questions at this time or thoughts? Feel free to ask them or put them in the chat and I will relay them.
I actually have a question about the inks when you did the cyanotypes in water and the inks. So I know you mentioned the 2 inks that you used, you used a mix. Could you just talk a little bit about that, about what you used that worked well even after submerging and, if there were any issues? Thanks.
Sure. So I found when I did the cyanotypes, if I printed the orange, letterpress ink tends to be a little bit transparent. So if I printed the orange ink over top of the blue cyanotypes, it would really come out kind of a muddy color and it wasn't very bright. So I found that it was better to do the printing first. The oil-based ink really resisted the chemicals so that where I printed with oil-based ink, the cyanotype chemicals wouldn't absorb into the paper at all.
And it didn't disturb, it didn't in any other way sort of wreck the ink, or, you know, it looked pretty good online. Yeah, okay.
So the soy-based ink allowed for a little bit of deterioration. So
I
it
see.
could actually wash it away or cyanotype over part of it. But for the most part, the ink stayed very true and the cyanotype just went around it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
We have a few questions in the chat, Lauren. The first one is, do you do art exhibitions?
I do a few. I had one show last year with Sarah Matthews over in a space over in Brentwood. We did a space exhibition on a joint project we worked on. I have a show up right now at the Montgomery College in Silver Spring, Maryland, where I think for the remainder of the month. So I'm doing an artist residency there, and I have a show up in the gallery of letterpress prints. And there's a new exhibition coming up in Glen Echo, Maryland, that opens the beginning of May. So I've done I do a few exhibitions, usually more group shows. And
Great.
some of the books, I've heard some of the books that I have sold to institutions, sometimes they will send me pictures of the books in exhibitions that have been set up by the library. So I know the University of Maryland has several of my books and they use them in some of their exhibitions.
Great. Another question is, what is the subject of your next book?
Ooh. So I'm probably working on a couple books all at once. So I'm definitely working on Fire, the next classical element. And that one's sort of in progress. I have an idea and I'm trying to make it work. And I think I'm going to have to call in an expert and take a workshop on how to make it function a little bit better. And I'm working on another book about the passenger pigeon. I just went to the National Gallery of Art and saw the piece from Audubon's Birds of America. It's the passenger pigeon. He depicted it, and there used to be lots of them, and then they went extinct because they were hunted excessively. So I'm working on a book about that.
Great. That leads nicely into our next question, which is about the fire book. Are you going to set the fire book on fire or carefully burn the edge, holes, etc.?
I don't currently have plans to burn it, but you never know. I recently found this tea that's just like a tea that you drink that was a smoked tea, and it has like this really interesting smoky smell. So I was gonna see if I could work that into my ink somehow to have like the smell of burning, but I'm not totally sure if that'll work out. We'll see. The future will tell.
Great. Okay. I have someone said your work is so cool. You have many nice comments. Do you have an idea of what you're gonna do for air?
So air is a little bit further out in the world. I don't know if you guys have ever gone to Pittsburgh to the Warhol Museum or had the Warhol exhibit come to you, but he did this one piece called Silver Clouds, where he used this, he helped invent this kind of Tyvek almost material. It's not Tyvek, but it's like this metallic silver material, and he used it to make these kind of balloons, and they fill them up to different amounts and float them around the room, and there's like a fan. So I'm not sure exactly what air was going to be. I'm pretty sure it's going to be air and not wind, but we'll see. That one's too out, so we'll see. It's just churning in the back of my head.
Someone also commented that you can also use tea to dye paper. And then I have, what advice can you give to someone who wants to begin a career in book arts or letterpress?
Yeah, I would say that you should just start doing it. I went to a lot of book art fairs and I went to a lot of different places and just started to learn about it because there's a lot of it. but it's really kind of hard to find. So like the book art centers, like Minneapolis Center for the Book, New York Center for the Book, San Francisco Center for the Book, Pyramid Atlantic Art Center. There's a lot of different of these great art centers. And because of the pandemic, they've done a lot of classes online. So I think you just start trying things and seeing what you like. I went to Pyramid and started printing, and I would just print in their open studio time. Like every week, I would just go and play with their wood type. And then at some point, I thought there wasn't enough wood type, and I decided to take a class on carving wood type. And and that was where my first book came from. So it was just kind of like following the path of things that interest you, and then just doing stuff, even if you only have like 5 or 10 minutes every day. If you just start setting, time instead of, looking through Instagram or spending time online, if you give yourself that time to like work on a project, then you'll start working on a project, and however long later you might finish it. And it's really a cool thing.
Great. Jackie, do you want to ask your question? You have your hand up.
Yeah, unmute myself. Well, Lauren, thank you so much. This was a great presentation. As you know, I'm a fan. And before your talk, I found this little book that you made from many, many years ago. And it's the alphabet. And I believe it's a smaller version of one that we have at the Library of Congress. And when you were talking about how to learn and get started, I was thinking another thing to do would be to come to like the Library of Congress, Rare Book Reading Room, and see what we have. Of course, is the finished product. As some of these studios, you could see the works in progress.
Yes.
But to my question, could you explain more about the cyanotype? Like what it? I love the way you were able to make the fern go across the open spread, and there's such clear images of the shape of the plant. So could you explain a little more about how you made that happen?
Sure. So cyanotype is a photographic process.
Right.
It was developed probably in about the 1800s, maybe by Annie Atkins. They have a book of hers up at the New York Public Library, up at 42nd Street in their like treasures collection. And I did go see it while I was putting this together, or before I started. So that was kind of an exciting thing to see, like the original. But she used this process where she would coat the papers, and then she would take actual like specimens of different plants or animals and just put them in the sun. And then she would have a really accurate kind of rendering, a photographic rendering, before they had other good ways of documenting wildlife. So she put together a whole book. So it's kind of a bluish greenish color. When you first coat it on this paper, it's kind of like a neon green or a neon yellow, and it's very, very strange. And I forget what the two elements are. I probably should have at least looked that up. I have like tons of it still. So if anybody needs cyanotype in their life, it's really a fantastic process. And I just think it looks so beautiful. But yeah, I would make the kind of the plexiglass almost collages. So I would take the fern and tape it down with clear packing tape, because I found that making collages was really enjoyable. And interestingly, all of the leaves, when I got them, they were mostly kind of green, and they stayed green, I guess, because they weren't exposed to the air. So they still are green today. And then I would just set them on top of the paper, and it would come through. So it was really a fun process. I don't really think of myself as a photographer, so I just think of it as a wet printing process rather than photography. So it sounds less scary to me.
It's fascinating with that, and your earth book is just beautiful.
Thank you.
I have a sort of related question. I noticed on the cover of the earth book that there was almost like a drop shadow effect of the word earth in addition to the orange letter pressing. How did you do that in the cyanotype?
So I actually letterpressed it onto a transparency and then incorporated it into the collage with the other elements.
Very cool.
So, and that's how the text is on the back of the cover too, where it's small metal type. It's just the same thing. And I just printed it directly on the transparency.
Nice.
Thanks.
I think we have two last questions in the chat. Have you traveled and has your travel influenced your art? And then also, what book artists besides yourself do you admire?
Nice questions. Yeah, I think that when I travel to different places, I end up seeing a lot of different sorts of things. I got my idea from for the human rights book, actually from going up to Eleanor Roosevelt's hometown up by Hyde Park in the Hudson Valley. And I think I was just really impressed by her and her work, and decided I might want to do a book that had to do with her. And so I did a book about human rights. It's this blue one in the background behind me. So it was kind of based on something that I learned that maybe I hadn't thought of before. So yeah, I think everywhere I go, I kind of get a sense of different ideas and different things and how people use design and how people communicate and just different ideas. And for book artists, they're definitely fortunate that at Pyramid Atlantic we have a collection of really impressive artists who do lots of cool things. So there are some great book artists there. I mentioned Sarah Matthews is a really great book artist. I just love the joy she brings and the folding and the printing. I convinced her letterpress was the best. She already thought that, but then I convinced her that letterpress was really the best. And then I've been to Codex, so I've seen several book artists there. I'm kind of terrible with names, but I like Macy Chadwick with her In Cahoots Press. She does a lot of letterpress stuff, but also has like a really beautiful attention to detail that I find beautiful. We've seen a lot of amazing books down at the Library of Congress for sure. And Russell Mara is always amazing. It's his precision. I feel like he was one of the earlier book artists that I saw at the Manhattan Book Fair up in New York. And maybe he was at UPenn doing a symposium about one of his books that he printed some 13 layers of photopolymer plate to make, 27 colors. It was just, I don't know, crazy. And I was like, you can do crazy things like that? I want to do that. So I find that book arts is like finding things that you really love and then just kind of following them, and can be a really fun and interesting experience.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Are there any remaining questions at this time?
Can I comment?
Yes, you can comment, and also, Lauren, take a look at the comments in the chat. There's some nice ones. And
Okay, 2 weekends ago, I went to I'm sorry, it's mirror image, but I went to the second Capitol Art Book Fair at Eastern Market. And I wasn't expecting a darn thing, and it turned out to be really wonderful. For instance, there was 3 young women from Missouri State University in Bozeman who
Montana.
had brought, pardon?
Montana.
Yes. They had brought a couple books that they had printed in a 4-week letterpress class, and they'd been sponsored by some Montana Arts Fund, which I thought was pretty neat because it paid for their transportation, I presume their hotel also. And there was a couple from Belgium who had a book. I didn't really understand. It was, each page was a field of color, sort of like a Ellsworth Kelly art piece. And there was a teacher from Alexandria named Kate Fitzworth. I'm screwing up her last name, but she had several books that were all one of a kind, that had hundreds of white strings coming out of them. Accordion books, very complicated folding books, and Glenstone Museum had a table because I hadn't realized they've published several books. And so there were about 36 exhibitors and about 100 artists. And anyone listening to this involved in letterpress, I think, should apply for it. I'll try to show you this, even though this is the website. I'll read it to you because, of course, it's appearing backwards for some reason. It's artbookfair.eastcityart.com, and that's artbookfair.eastcityart.com. And I presume there'll be a fair next year. I'm trying to think. Val Lucas, I tried to get in this one. She was too late. I think she'll try again next year. But I thought it was just a wonderful thing. I went back on Sunday, the second day, just because it was so neat. And I had so much fun talking to people. So there.
I went to that fair also. I thought it was really impressive. I saw one of another of my book artists that I really like, eBay Crawley. She's there. She's out of Richmond, and she's done a book with Women's Studio Workshop, and she has a book in the National Museum of Women in the Arts. And her work is always very impressive. And she's just so generous with her time and her knowledge about printing and stories. And I agree. It was a really fantastic fair. I heard that it happened last year, but I hadn't been there before. So it was nice that it was so close and such a wonderful fair.
Right. And if you got hungry, you just walked a few feet south, and 2/3 of the building is the food hall. And there was one particular place that always seemed to have 20, 30 people in line. You might have noticed that, Lauren.
I must have missed that. But
Well,
nice
anyway,
down there in the Eastern Market.
It's a great combination of food and print. So it's not a bad place. The only disadvantage is I could see using a lot more space than they had. And I suspect next year there'll be more competition. And so if you're interested, talk to the organizer is a guy named Phil. And at that artbookfair.eastcityart.com site, he would be the one to talk to or email about next year.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. All right, thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Our next book art series talk will be May 16th with Chris Fridden and Carrie Miki-Lani Schroeder on their new book, Please Stay Until Doomsday. So please join us next month to hear more about that, everyone. And this talk will also be posted on our YouTube. So you can.
So you'll give us, send us some emails.
Yes. Yep.
Great.
For both the next book art series talk, all of that will go through CBAA's communications channels.
Okay,
Thank you
because
so much.
I have a terrible memory.
Yep, it'll be in the emails, and so you can register for that as well. All right, thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and close out. Thank you so much for sharing your work again, Lauren. It was so great.
Thank you, Annika.